Engineering tells you to follow procedures. Burt Munro did the opposite. While factories spent millions on wind tunnels, metallurgy labs, and failure simulations, Burt used a shed, a file, and whatever scrap metal he could afford that week. While engineers designed engines to survive within limits, Burt asked a far more dangerous question. How far past the limit can I go before it explodes? This wasn't innovation by blueprint. This was innovation by refusal. The motorcycle that set world land speed records wasn't carefully finished, perfectly machined, or professionally validated. It leaked oil, it flexed, it broke parts constantly, and it was rebuilt again and again by one man who didn't believe in final versions. Burt Munro didn't respect engineering rules, he interrogated them. Every component on his bike was wrong by modern standards. Welded cranks, home-cast pistons, improvised aerodynamics, safety systems that bordered on optional. And yet, this Frankenstein machine rewrote the record books. So in this video, we're revealing 10 things engineering says shouldn't work, but somehow did, because Burt Munro didn't beat the world's fastest machines by being smarter than engineers. He beat them by refusing to think like one. Stand next to any modern superbike and you're looking at a snapshot frozen in carbon fiber amber. Every radius signed off, every bolt torqued to a corporate decimal. Stand next to Burt Munro's 1920 Indian and you're staring at a moving target that forgot to stop. There was no final spec, only the version that fired up that morning. Each run across the salt coughed up new data, a hairline crack in the piston skirt, a steering head shimmy at 180 miles per hour, an exhaust valve glowing like a cigarette cherry. Burt logged the flaw, walked back to his motel toolbox, and started cutting. Cylinder walls were shaved thinner than cigarette paper, the crankcases were stitched together with weld beads that looked like lava flows, and the frame lost so many gussets it resembled a wire coat hanger. If a part survived, it earned another chance. If it failed, it was reborn in a haze of oxyacetylene and filing dust. Engineers begged him for a baseline measurement. Burt handed them a coffee-stained napkin with yesterday's speed and the words, "Try harder." Museums freeze history in a single pose, but which Munro special do you pin under glass? The 1962 version that cracked 178 miles per hour? The 67 iteration with the hand-carved 12-to-1 piston? The final salt cake skeleton that unofficially nudged 205? None lasted longer than the push start back to the pits. Burt wasn't building a product. He was iterating a living hypothesis, using his own heartbeat as the red line. Perfection was irrelevant. Progress was the only finish line that counted. Most racing mills are cast around a single number, 750cc, 1000cc, 1200cc, then frozen under seal. Burt Munro treated cubic centimeters like loose change in a jar. Over 40 years, the same engine morphed from its original 37 cubic inches, or 600 cubic centimeters, to 850, then 920, 950, and finally 985 cubic centimeters. He bored cylinders until the walls resembled eggshells, pressed in new liners turned from diesel truck sleeves, then bored those again. Stroke grew when he offset ground the crank, moving the big end closer to the flywheel by the thickness of a thumbnail. Measurement taken with a carpenter's ruler, not a micrometer. Each extra cubic centimeter bought air, and air bought horsepower. Horsepower bought speed, and speed was the only receipt Burt ever kept. Every leap stressed parts designed for a gentler life. Bigger pistons hammered bearings harder, longer strokes whipped con rods into question marks, compression edged past 12-to-1 until the poor Indian detonated like a gravel truck on full throttle. Any OEM engineer would have declared the architecture bankrupt. Burt simply filed the crown smoother, poured another spoon of castor oil into the tank, and rolled toward the start line. Modern race engines live inside a displacement prison. Munro's motor lived in a hallway that kept stretching. It survived because intuition, not a rule book, drew the blueprints, and because Burt trusted feel over failure theory right up to the moment the timing lights flashed 184 miles per hour and rewrote physics in his favor. Now, order pistons today, and you get aerospace-grade forgings, diamond-cut crowns, and a metallurgical report. Burt Munro got a coffee can of scrap cylinder heads, a hand-crank bellows, and a hole he dug in the Invercargill dirt. That shallow pit, lined with rammed sand and carved to the rough shape of a 1920 Indian piston. was his foundry. He melted the aluminum over a coke fire until the pool shimmered like mercury, then poured it through a tin funnel he cut from a soup can. No vacuum degassing, no grain flow analysis, no Rockwell tester, just the smell of hot metal and the conviction that if it broke, he'd simply cast another before dinner cooled. Castings are porous, brittle, unpredictable. Every textbook says they're suicide at 8,000 RPM. Burt sanded the flash off with a sheet of emery wrapped around a broom handle, scribed his own ringlands with a broken hacksaw blade, and guessed skirt clearance by sliding the piston into the hot cylinder and feeling how long it took to drop out again. Porosity, he filled voids with Devcon epoxy, filed smooth, and sent it down the salt. Miraculously, they held sometimes just long enough for one unofficial pass, sometimes for a season, because Munro treated pistons like spark plugs, consumables, not crown jewels. Each failure taught him a finer pour, a cooler mold, a smidge more tin from melted bearings to harden the alloy. Modern engineers chase infinite life. Burt chased infinite learning, one backyard casting at a time, until the speed gun finally blinked 184, and proved intuition can outrun perfection when the foundry is open past midnight. If this bike is already making you uncomfortable, good, because everything you've heard so far gets worse. Because Burt Munro didn't just bend engineering rules, he ignored them completely and somehow kept going faster. If you're enjoying this breakdown, hit like and subscribe. This channel isn't about brochure specs or factory myths, it's about the machines that shouldn't work, but do. And stay with me, because the next section is where Burt crosses the line from clever backyard tinkerer into something engineers still argue about today. This is where the bike stops being modified and starts becoming dangerous. In the cathedral of crankshafts, forgings hang like stained glass saints, stress-relieved, magnafluxed, balanced to micrograms. Burt Munro's crank came from a junkyard and a stick welder. When he wanted more stroke, he sliced the journal, inserted a home-turn spacer, and stitched the assembly back together with arc strikes that looked like metal popcorn. No furnace, no ton press, no X-ray, just a grinding wheel chucked in a drill press and an oil-stained finger checking radius by touch. Textbooks scream stress riser and heat-affected zone, both live in every bead he laid. Yet the crank survives because Burt managed load, not material perfection. He never chased 12,000 RPM hero figures. He chased 8,000 sustained, where inertia punches once per power pulse and then relaxes. He polished weld crowns until they felt like glass under a thumbnail, balanced counterweights with a bathroom scale and a broom handle, and always rolled on the throttle like a man pulling a tablecloth. Smooth, deliberate, no sudden jerks. Modern engineers eliminate risk with budgets. Burt managed it with awareness, turning supposed weakness into predictable behavior. That welded crank should have twisted into scrap on the first run. Instead, it carried a backyard special to 184 miles per hour, proving that intimate knowledge of exactly where failure lives can be more powerful than the finest forging money can buy. Now, where most mechanics reach for thread seal and torque wrenches, Burt Munro kept a roll of toilet paper and a grin. His Indian didn't seep. It wept, flinging a fine mist of hot oil across the cases like a sprinkler cooling a lawn. Engineers shudder. Pressure loss, contamination, fire risk. Burt saw free convection. Every drip that wicked across a 400-degree cylinder wall carried BTU away faster than any radiator could have managed on the salt. He drilled vent holes behind the timing chest, left base gasket surfaces lapped but uncoated, and tightened case bolts only until they felt friendly. When a new streak appeared after a run, he didn't swear. He studied the trail like a hunter reading tracks. A growing stain near the exhaust port meant that pocket of metal was expanding more than its neighbor. Time to relieve a fin or richen the mixture. If a leak suddenly dried up, worry set in. Heat was being trapped, expansion climbing toward seizure. The bike left the start line looking like it had already completed a 500-mile day, oil hazing off the exhaust and rear tire dotted with castor perfume. Spectators laughed. Burt smiled back. That constant bleed kept piston crowns 30 degrees cooler than a sealed motor would have tolerated, buying the few seconds he needed to punch the clocks and roll into history, one oily drip at a time. The 1920 Indian Scout Redline was a gentlemanly 4,500 RPM, enough to pull a sidecar, not enough to pull your arms out. Burt Munro doubled that number and kept going. He spun his hand-built bottom end past 8,000 RPM on the salt, a speed the factory never imagined and metallurgy never promised. Valve springs should have turned to spaghetti, rods should have exited the cases, the cast crank should have folded like wet cardboard. None did, because Munro treated mechanical cruelty like a negotiation, not a mugging. With no tack, he tuned his ear to pitch. The lope of the cam at idle, the hard bark at 6,000, the metallic scream beyond 7,500 that said, 1 more miles per hour, then back off. Throttle openings were rolled on like silk off a spool. No snap wheelies, no clutch dumps, so inertia climbed without the hammer blow that breaks parts. If the tone sharpened or the foot peg buzz changed frequency, he lifted, noted the spot, and filed a thowel off the cam or added another cc of oil to the fuel next run. Modern motors rely on rev limiters to cut sparks before stupidity arrives. Burt's limiter was neural, a rider who knew exactly where the cliff edge hid and danced on it with steel-toe boots. Strength didn't save the engine, respect did, and that respect rewrote the record books one carefully managed RPM at a time. Burt Munro's speed recipe was simple. If it slows you down, leave it in the trailer. The Munro Special thundered past 180 miles per hour on a single soda can-sized drum up front and a bicycle-caliber rear shoe that looked embarrassed to be there. Engineers gasp, dual 320mm discs, radial calipers, ABS. Pure sci-fi at the time. Burt shrugged everything off. At Bonneville, you don't stop for traffic lights. You coast for a mile across a white ocean until aerodynamic drag and salt drag bleed off speed like a sponge. Every extra ounce of cast iron rotor was an ounce that wasn't helping acceleration, so he paired the brakes until they were just strong enough to hold the bike on the start line and nothing more. Was it dangerous? Only if you tried to ride it on the street. Burt understood context the way a sniper understands wind. The salt is flat, sight lines infinite, shut down areas measured in counties, not meters. He trusted space over hardware, weight over warranty. Modern bikes carry brakes for liability lawsuits and mountain descents. Munro carried just enough to keep the bike from rolling away while he tightened the axle nut. Underbraked by any textbook, yet perfectly adequate for the only stage that counted, the place where the clock stopped and the world ran out of pavement. Peer at the frame neck and you'll still find a 1920 Indian serial number, but that's where genealogy stops and autobiography begins. By the time Burt clicked 180 miles per hour, the Scout wore a skeleton he'd hand-whittled, down tubes sliced, raked, and re-welded so often the weld beads resembled geological strata. Fuel tank beaten from an aircraft drop tank, then trimmed with tin snips when it rubbed his knees at 180. Wheels started life as 16-inch Harley hoops, narrowed in a vise so the slick could tuck into a salt-slim fairing. Fork legs were turned down on a lathe made from a truck axle. The triple clamp began life as a Morris Minor wishbone. Even the oil pump is a repurposed diesel injector. Burt machined a new rotor, soldered a pickup tube, and bolted it where the generator once lived. Carburetors? One-off venture eyes soldered from brass plumbing, chokes filed to oval because round wouldn't flow enough oxygen. The only factory remnant is the concept of 2 wheels and a V-twin. Everything else is solutions cataloged under one name, Munro. Museums call it an Indian, but that's just the birth certificate. The bike that set records is a living journal. Every weld and entry, every hand-filed flat a footnote in the longest, fastest experiment ever conducted on salt. Most teams arrive at Bonneville with laser-cut jigs, TIG-welded chromoly, and geometry locked in months earlier. Burt arrived with a hacksaw, a suitcase of scrap steel, and a coal-fired soldering iron. When the front end started hunting at 180 miles per hour, he didn't radio engineering. He rolled behind the rental RV, marked the steering head with a soapstone, and sliced an inch out of the down tube right there on the salt. By dusk, the neck was raked 2 degrees steeper, a pair of surplus bed frame angles were plug welded across the backbone, and the bike was back in impound before the night chill turned the lake crust to mush. Professional tuners gasped, "You can't hot rope a chassis like a garden gate." But Burt wasn't guessing, he was translating. Every weave, every head shake, every time the rear stepped out was feedback etched into his inner ear. He adjusted until the machine stopped arguing and started singing, even if that meant the left down tube ended up 1/8 of an inch shorter than the right. The next morning, he clicked 180 with one hand on the bar and the other shading his eyes from the sun, stable as a freight train. Theory had its day. Reality just got welded in the pits. In 1967, when Burt Munro nudged his streamlined Indian past 184 miles per hour, NASA was already testing turbofan jets, and Honda had a 250 cubic centimeter six-cylinder screaming to 18,000 revolutions per minute. His competition on the Salt arrived with magnesium cases, twin overhead cams, and slide rules full of compression ratios. Burt brought a 1920 Scout side valve bottom end, a camshaft you could measure with a wooden ruler, and metallurgy recycled from tractor parts. No titanium, no computer-mapped ignition, no wind tunnel data. Just a man who had spent half a century learning every cough, sneeze, and heartbeat that motor could make. That intimacy became his advantage. While factory teams chased thousands through exotic alloys, Munro chased hundreds by listening to piston tone change when the tailwind picked up. He knew the exact moment the big end bearing cleared its throat before seizure, felt the crank flex 1/1000th of an inch when the Salt went smooth, and could read spark plug soot like a fortune teller. Modern engineering worships replacement. Design it, test it, bin it, iterate. Burt worshipped understanding. Shape it, break it, understand it, refine it. The record still stands because mastery doesn't age, it compounds. His 50-year-old engine didn't beat modern machines by being newer, it beat them by being known down to the molecule and loved right up to the breaking point. And that's the part most people still don't understand about Burt Munro. No factory backing, no sponsors, no engineering team, no safety net. Just a man, a shed, a pile of scrap metal, and an idea everyone else said was impossible. While manufacturers spent millions chasing speed, Burt chased it with hand-cast pistons, welded crankshafts, and solutions that made engineers wince. And somehow, it worked. Not because the rules were wrong, but because he refused to let them limit him. And if stories like this matter to you, the forgotten machines, the misunderstood engineers, the people who built greatness without permission, hit like and subscribe. And drop a comment below. Would a story like Burt Munro's even be possible today? Ride safe, ride smart, and I'll see you in the next one.